Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So this is going to be my Gotham episode 16 video, all about flying Graysons and the Joker, or who seems like the character they're turning into the Joker. Bruno Heller talked a lot about how they're trying to be faithful to the comics, but because the Joker doesn't really have a set origin story, they're adapting their version of it. It's just like the Flash TV show is taking a lot of core elements from, say, like the Wally West era and the Barry Allen era and combining them. So it's not exactly like any set comic book story, but it's as close as possible. All in all, best episode of Gotham so far. If you're going to start with an episode of Gotham and you haven't been watching it yet, this would be a great episode to start with, especially if you're trying to get your friends to watch it too. So careful for spoilers from the episode if you haven't seen it yet, starting with top 5 moments. Number 5, Bruce is having nightmares about Killer Croc. It's not necessarily a Killer Croc Easter egg, but the drawing in his journal at the very beginning of the episode looks suspiciously like Killer Croc. I don't think it's a coincidence that they cut really quickly to Fish Mooney beneath Gotham. I think that area where they are, the sewer system, I think that's beneath Gotham somewhere. Maybe even below Arkham City somewhere. If you want to get really specific with Killer Crocs, you could say this looks a little bit like Mike Mignoola's. Most of you probably know him as the Hellboy creator, but he also drew Batman for a while. If we do get to see Killer Croc on the show, I suspect we would see the human version of that first. We haven't really veered into Gotham mutants yet, but I do think the show, before the show ends, however many seasons it gets, will do something like that. On to number 4, Penguin is going to get a little bit of help with his nightclub. I really like the way they opened the episode with Penguin's mother singing that song across all the different scenes. It actually almost sounded like Fish Mooney could hear it beneath Gotham somewhere. I don't think that area they're in is beneath the club. I think they edited it that way so you would associate that place with Gotham. Later when he's playing Heart and Soul on the piano, you kind of wonder what his heart and soul is. Like, is it going to be this nightclub? When Falcone gave him the club, he bumped him up to top tier status. So I think the club has a lot of sentimental value to him, especially since he spent so much time working there for Fish Mooney when he was first coming up. The Butch reveal was so much fun. Don't you just wonder what Zsasz did to him in that basement? I almost don't want to know. That's like HBO territory. He's like the Theon Greyjoy of Gotham now. I saw a lot of you guys tweeting me Reek stuff during the episode. Hopefully he hasn't lost any of the body parts that Reek has lost. As dark as some of Fox's stuff gets, I don't think that they would veer into Reek territory, literally. I do like the Butch character. They spent some time developing him, so I'm glad that they're keeping him on the show as part of this brainwash storyline. In the promos, you see Fish Mooney eventually comes back, so I think she'll take Butch back too at a certain point. Either take him back or kill him. That'd actually be even more interesting. Like if she senses that he can't come back and has to kill him. Of all the Fish Mooney specific characters, I think she's the only one that's safe. And I'll talk about it more at the end of this video, but the way they edited this was so much better. I mean, usually they try to cut away for comedy, like whenever the blood splashed on the woman's face when Penguin killed that guy that was heckling his mom. Usually they do things like that pretty often, but it felt like some of their creative choices were a little bit different in this episode, and it felt like it was just so much more fun. Moving on to number 3, Meet the Flying Graysons. As expected, Dick Grayson's parents were just really young in this episode. It just explains the timeline about how Robin can be younger than Bruce. I really like what they did with the Lloyds and the Graysons. They had like a Hatfield and McCoy thing going on, or you could think of it as like Romeo and Juliet. I really wish Gotham could always do this good of a job in developing its side characters. Like this whole carnival felt like it existed outside the world of the show, and that's really what it takes for characters to feel real. They had this whole American Horror Story carnival theme going on. It was so much fun. If you never watched that show, it was a Clancy Brown show, and he's actually on The Flash right now, so it's this fun meta thing going on. I kept expecting to see Sarah Paulson walk by in the background with 2 heads. A lot of you told me you thought you heard Mark Hamill's Joker laugh during this big crowd scene. It might have just been the Jerome character laughing off screen. Speaking of which, let's talk some backstory. On to number 2, the Joker's backstory explained. This is where I feel like the show asked that most of us as viewers, as people who are very familiar with the Joker character. What they're saying is that Jerome's mother was just really promiscuous, and at one point, a long time ago, had a relationship with the Cicero character, and then just never told him who his real father was. He slowly went crazy because of what his mother did, because of her behavior, which is interesting because it's kind of the same thing that's going on with the Penguin and his mother, only their relationship seems much more positive, or codependent, however you want to think about it. Both very twisted relationships, but one seems a little more loving. Jerome is like what would happen if the Penguin ever snapped inside, like if he ever just couldn't handle his mother anymore. I really do hope that they do not kill Carol Kane off anytime soon. She's really the scariest character on Gotham right now. And my number 1 moment, obviously Jerome cracks, starts to become the Joker. They definitely ADR'd that laugh at the end. That's not a natural laugh. I mean, I feel like you could practice and get it halfway there, but they probably tuned it up in post a little. They did say that they would play around with the idea of who would become the Joker, so you could always say that Jerome is just a crazy person, but I do feel like based on what this episode put forth, this is the character who will become the Joker. Right now, it seems like he's headed to Arkham. They haven't introduced the Hugo Strange character yet, but they did say that his character was very important to the creation of a lot of the supervillains that we'd see eventually. So what I'd really like to see is this Jerome character interact with Hugo Strange and them develop a really twisted relationship inside Arkham. Let me know though, what was your favorite moment and what would you like to see them do with this Jerome character next? I feel like we all want to see him inside Arkham with Hugo Strange. I feel like that would be the best possible scenario. Just to address some of the other characters in the episode. So I know everyone's wondering what's going on with Fish Mooney and who the manager, quote unquote, is. At the end of the episode, whenever they played the promo for episode 17, she said the name Dr. Dolmacher. So I'm thinking that that's who the manager is. And they're using those people, they're harvesting them for organs. Because of the Bruce scene in the boardroom, what I'm hoping is that they weave all these like organ harvesting, crazy Arkham City plot lines together with some of these board members. That's really what you want to see at the end of a season. You want to see that all these different plot lines that are all over the place are all connected. They all have a focal point. And I think the Wayne board is going to figure into that. They didn't seem like they were cartoon villains whenever Bruce was meeting with them, but hopefully they'll develop some of those characters a little bit better that Bruce can go up against. They'll develop a villain inside the board. I'm sure you guys saw a ton of Easter eggs. Here are a couple that I haven't mentioned yet. Haley Circus is actually straight out of the comics. That's who the Flying Graysons originally performed with. Right now in the New 52 universe, Dick Grayson has actually gone back and used them to help solve crimes, so they've actually brought the circus back into the contemporary stories. Catwoman and Ivy eating the cereals, kind of an Easter egg for Jim Lee doing new characters for the General Mills cereal boxes. Jim Lee, famous DC artist, actually did versions of Count Chocula, Frankenberry, and Boo Berry, so if you haven't already, you should actually go buy a box of Count Chocula just because Jim Lee drew it. They mentioned the Hellfire Club. That's obviously a Marvel group, so I think that they were just playing with that. I don't think the Hellfire group is going to turn into anything big. The Red Hood Gang is coming in next week's episode, but that's a completely separate group. I kind of mentioned it before. My only real thumbs down was the Barbara scene. I liked that they had this Catwoman Ivy Barbara scene. I could feel the humor that they were going for, but it just didn't play with me. The montage felt a little forced, but that might be because I love Marina Baccarin so much. Leslie Tompkins' character is the spirit of adventure that Gotham has been missing all season. She's probably one of the best new characters they've ever brought on the show, so there's no way you would believe Gordon would leave her for Barbara, which unfortunately means that Leslie Tompkins is probably going to be the one to lead Gordon. So just to remind you guys, next week's episode is Red Hood Gang. I'll explain their backstory in the comics whenever I post that video. Be sure to subscribe to get it. New episode of The Flash tonight. That video will post after the episode airs. It's going to be like part 2 of the 2-part Firestorm story that's going on. We're also pushing into time travel. So while you guys wait for that stuff to drop, you can click here to catch up on The Flash before tonight's episode, and you can click here to watch last week's Gotham. Thank you so much for watching. So let's all high five. I'll see you guys tonight.